Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today I'm going to teach you how to break the law. So bookmark this video, break the law in a resistive manner. I'm not going to teach you how to be a criminal, but I am going to teach you how to fight against the crazy censorship that's going up against us. So I don't know if you know about this, okay, but today, well, if you live in Missouri, the great state, you might notice that your internet got a little bit more restricted today. Well, what happened, ladies and gentlemen? Missouri decided to pass their own set of age verification laws. And yeah, that means the internet in Missouri today is apparently going to be restricting you from accessing the adult websites. Basically, any website that caters, I believe, 33% of its content skewing towards being harmful to minors, which is already an incredibly vague term. It could be anything from adult content all the way to things that whatever the discretionary board considers to be harmful, Now, many people can take this as censorship. To be honest with you, I think the internet censorship crap has gone on far enough, and it's ultimately a crusade led by politicians to bring in mass surveillance under the guise of protecting the kids. We'll talk about all of that, but to me, I wanted to show you guys a way to resist this crap and access the internet you know and love while keeping your privacy. And why? Because I think the politicians running this kind of crap are so old and decrepit, they actually don't understand how the internet works. So because of this stuff going on and people slowly resisting by looking up what a VPN is. So for instance, literally today, okay, the term VPN was searched in a breakout sense. Best free VPN for phone, best budget VPN, best built-in VPN, no lag VPN. There's no doubt, okay, that there's a lot of people in Missouri who just want to access the internet like they used to be doing in the freest country in the world. You know, we live in a day and age where America is becoming like China with the Great Firewall and all that bullshit, where people's access to information and general shit is being slowly restricted. Now, the problem that I have with these searches is when somebody in Missouri looks up best free VPN for iPhone, they're probably like gonna download a free VPN that's actually stealing all of their information, that's actually malicious towards them. This law is almost a gateway for people to get their shit hacked and stolen. So I'm gonna teach you guys how to get access to respectable VPNs in a private fashion. So in order to do this, right, we're going to have to engage with crypto, boys and girls. So inside my entire exchange in Canada, I realized very quickly, not that I realized, I knew this, but in Canada, there's not really an easy way for you and I to buy anonymous crypto, because cryptocurrency in a lot of ways are subject to a lot of laws and regulations. So when you go to online exchanges, they'll ask you for your driver's ID, all that kind of crazy crap. So inside this experiment for today's video, I decided I'm going to go in my general area and find a place where there is a Bitcoin wallet, ladies and gentlemen, a Bitcoin ATM. Now these ATMs are really special. You can actually Google them in your area. So for instance, around where I live in Oakville Market, so to speak, yeah, I know you guys can probably like, oh, Moody, you're doxing yourself. Look, this is a big ass city, okay? So if you're going to knock on every door trying to find a fat Indian guy, I just don't. You get it, okay? So you go to this marketplace, and inside the Oakville Market, ladies and gentlemen, it is actually inside this little market. This is what it looks like, next to the Puff Puff Vape. So inside this store, somewhere, ladies and gentlemen, will exist a Bitcoin ATM. Now, these Bitcoin ATMs are really special. You can connect them to your credit card, your bank card. You can deposit it that way, which kind of defeats the purpose of anonymity. Or in some cases, some ATMs will allow you to deposit cash anonymously. You know, what a novel concept. You can take your cash, your dollary dues, put them in, connect them to a Bitcoin wallet, and actually end up receiving money. As we're speaking, ladies and gentlemen, on my Bitcoin wallet, I actually did in fact receive some Bitcoin money. Now, using that Bitcoin crypto money, I can actually go to a decentralized exchange known as BISC. Now, BISC is by far one of the most popular exchanges on here, and apparently, according to the people who care about their anonymity, they guarantee no KYC. So again, what you're doing over here is you're finding another individual that has Monero, or you're swapping money around. So I took my Bitcoin and I swapped it for a currency known as XMR, which is Monero. So when I swapped $60 of Bitcoin for Monero, remember there are fees associated. In fact, even those Bitcoin ATMs I talked about, which are available in a lot of these convenience stores, do in fact charge higher than average fees. So imagine you're kind of just paying more for that extra sense of privacy. Now, if you don't really care about that, or if you want the convenience factor, use an online exchange. You can buy crypto literally in minutes. Now, once you have access to these cryptocurrencies, you can swap them on BISC for XMR. You should also go to Monero's website, and you should also set up a actual Bitcoin or Monero wallet over there, because it's actually a different currency. So for instance, underneath Monero, you can go to their website, you can go to the download section, for instance, download their GUI wallet and make a wallet here. So once you exchange from your Bitcoin wallet to your Monero wallet, you can then go to a respectable organization like Mulvad, for instance, go to their VPN service and pay them €5 per month. So because you transferred probably $60, you probably have enough money for several months of this service. So again, it's a simple matter of making an account number, going into your actual account page, and depositing the required amount of Monero to get access to their VPN service. So now, if you're in Missouri, for instance, now if you really care about your privacy and anonymity in any part of the world, not just Missouri, following these steps allows you to at least retain some level of your privacy and be able to at least partake in the internet that you ever used to love and is slowly being ripped away from you. Now again, privacy-wise, remember, because you went to a Bitcoin ATM, if the glowies really want to get you, it's as easy as figuring out on the Bitcoin transaction chain when the transaction occurred, going to that specific, convenience store you were at, pulling the CCTV. I mean, again, remember, you're not that important for the fucking glowies to go after, but if you really just cared about your privacy or anonymity and you didn't just want to, exchange your ID around, because really you shouldn't have to be exchanging your fucking ID to access sites like Reddit, to access sites like YouTube, to access many services on the internet, you can go this way and then, using Mulvad, route yourself through a country that is still free and use that internet access to browse the internet you know and love. That is the actual steps that I took. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you can use some civil disobedience, learned that in school, by the way, and fight back against a tyrannical, near-fascist government, okay? That is what you have to do in order to thrive. So no matter what side of the fucking aisle you're on, boys and girls, at least you learned something today. You learned how to resist against a machine that will not stop at taking away every single civil liberty you have. Now you might be like, but Muda, aren't you just allowing those children to get harmed? Isn't this going to teach them how to access the internet? First off, kids are smarter than you think. They're gonna be accessing crazy shit regardless. You wanna know something about banning things? I want you to actually look at the history of what prohibition was in the United States. You know, when we banned alcohol in the United States, what the fuck happened the next day? People started drinking hooch. People started drinking booze. A lot of booze that wasn't even quality tested. You wanna know where this happens to this very day, ladies and gentlemen? No better than if you look at Saudi Arabia. This is from the Saudi Medical Journal, by the way. Visual and neurologic sequelae of methanol poisoning in Saudi Arabia. According to this, it's a retrospective series of 50 consecutive patients in the King Khalid Eye Specialist Hospital. So again, Saudi Arabia has really good, healthcare. Unfortunately, some people shy away from it, from what I understand, because of the societal implications. I believe Saudi Arabia gives you free HIV/AIDS care, but obviously, with the whole cultural impact, right? How'd you get it there, buddy? Did you did you play with Steve a little bit too much? That's not allowed in our country. Yeah, there's a lot of people that sometimes will be very worried. And of course, in this case, there was a lot of people who admitted to medical professionals that they drank unbranded alcohol. They drank perfume or cologne because, yes, those do contain alcohol. The denatured kind, the really bad ones for you, within 1 to 3 days before losing vision in both eyes. Because, yes, alcohol is poison, okay? You are literally poisoning yourself as you go out and drink. At least with regulations and laws, we can at least, when you go to a bar, right, they ask you for your ID, whatever, fine. The bartender checks my ID, gives me a bottle of booze. We don't outright completely ban the thing and subject people to getting access to, alcohol that is dangerous for them. And you could make an argument that, yeah, when it comes to an adult website, we are asking for an ID for people to access. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit different on the internet because the internet is not the bar, okay? A lot of children that go to the bar will often get rejected, and they will keep getting rejected until eventually they go to the one shady dive bar that needs the money and might be okay with serving underage people drinks. But that's really the journey that people have to go to. It's not that it doesn't exist, unfortunately, it does. But when it comes to the internet, yes, you can ban all American websites. But you can't ban internet websites from the Russian Federation. You can't ban them from Asian countries. You can't ban the internet outright. Children will still, unfortunately, be able to access those websites. So unless you go on the ISP level and that breaks a whole bunch of other things, you're unfortunately allowing all the American websites to go down that do operate with a lot of regulations, so making sure that performers are over the age of 18, yada, 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 even though that's also not perfect. If you ever see how the sausage is made, the adult industry is really a dark place to go down. I made a video 3 years ago about trafficking, 3, 4 years ago, and I looked at some of the darkest stories in legal adult studios in this country alone. And it is one of the most disgusting rabbit holes that I went down, to the point that even watching any adult media is just never an okay thing. But again, these children, or really anybody who cares about the internet or accessing this kind of stuff, will go to those other websites and unfortunately be exposed to people that probably aren't the age of 18, maybe under, people that are exposed to really, people that might be forcibly coerced into things. Where regulations often go down in this kind of world, people will go to those websites and see, unfortunately, things that they probably shouldn't. Now, the thing is, if you're an adult and you want to, if you're a child, right, the best thing you can do for a kid is just be a parent, okay? Now, I can admit that these are very difficult conversations to have, but if you're going to bring somebody into the world, you should also walk in with the responsibility that at some point you're going to have these hard to have conversations. Now, look, when I was a kid, my dad told me, "Look, you're not weird for looking up internet, pornography. It's something that happens. Every kid gets caught. I got caught. It happens." And the thing is, my dad was like, "Listen, it's just fake stuff. It is stuff that's going to completely." He told me that basically it's not real. It's going to distort my perception effectively, and that's what it came down to. And it's one of those things where, again, he told me about how people get addicted to it, and he mentioned that it was like a drug, and that's something that stuck with me to this day. It's one of the things where even smoking a cigarette or having a drink or something, it's when you see that you've started to develop a dependence on it. And then eventually, like any drug, you're just going to go constantly requiring it more and more, and you're going to want a harder and harder version of it. Pornography is not real. In fact, if anything, it will absolutely ruin your perception of how to, even navigate things like sex. But this is not me having the talk with you. If you're a parent, you should have this talk with your kids. And ultimately, you should be using any form of parental controls on your devices that are available locally to be stopping your children, or just, again, have these conversations. It is hard to have, but it is something you need to do regardless of anything. So obviously, this is something that I was taught. This is something that I believe ultimately lies on the back end of parents. We should not be turning the internet into a show us the ID and enter this website party, because ultimately, as we've seen, platforms like Discord, which required identification very recently, also had that identification hacked. These tech agencies don't care about your privacy. They don't care. Once your ID gets hacked, you're open to paramount amounts of, internet identity theft or anything of that nature. Again, we shouldn't be turning the internet into this simply because parents are not parenting enough. If anything, like I've always said, if you're going to have children and you're going to give them unfettered access to these devices, because where else are children getting these cell phones, tablets, and computers? Granted, they're not earning the kinds of money that you would need in today's day and age to be buying these devices. So clearly it's the parents or somebody who is their guardian involved in this process. If you're going to give your kids access to this, you should be able to monitor or control it. It's like keeping alcohol around your house. If you're not able to lock it away or hide it or make sure that it's not being tampered with by your children, then you probably shouldn't have it in your home to begin with. Now, to go back to, again, this situation, right? When VPNs started getting brought into the mix, obviously there are other laws that started to get brought in too. Because these government fossils know that, oh shit, people are just using VPNs to bypass the shitty laws that we made. What if we start targeting those gosh darn VPNs? And that is unfortunately what is happening, ladies and gentlemen. In Wisconsin, there are now legislation that are being brought forward. The bill acknowledges a business entity that knowingly, intentionally publishes or distributes material harmful to minors on the internet from a website that contains a substantial portion of such material to prevent persons from accessing the website from an internet protocol address or internet protocol address ranges that is linked to or known to be a virtual private network system or provider. So again, a lot of these websites are going to have to be putting a lot more checks and balances on the VPNs that they go to. And the thing about VPNs is ultimately VPNs are not used for negative things. A lot of legitimate uses of VPNs come from accessing your company. Sometimes people that are at schools have to access school information through a school-provided VPN. And in a lot of cases, VPNs are important to protect the privacy of individuals that have been abused. We can all agree in the world, unfortunately, there's a lot of domestic abuse that exists. And one of the things that you'll read about on places like domesticshelters.org that provides information to people that are escaping or have escaped and are trying to keep their anonymity from abusive partners will tell you that, yeah, you absolutely should be using virtual private networks. So for instance, after leaving an abuser, to protect your devices, use a VPN to hide your IP address and keep your browsing history hidden, and consider using a library computer or other public Wi-Fi network with the VPN for added anonymity. Because yes, when you go to websites without a VPN, at times your IP address can be logged. And sometimes that IP address can link to a pretty, general part of a city. But sometimes that general part is all a domestic survivor will get scared of, because ultimately it closes down the pen needed to identify where you're actually at. In a lot of ways, when it comes to, the government giving a shit about children to begin with, remember, there are ways for the government to counteract this kind of stuff without absolutely throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Remember, mass surveillance is like literally a few weeks away, months away from actually being solidified all over the world. If it's happening in the United States to such a degree, imagine other parts of the world where the privacy and the freedom foundations of a country aren't as rock solid and secure. The reason why it's being talked about state by state in the United States as of now is because there are a lot of checks and balances to the laws and regulations. If you truly disagree with this, write to your representative, even as futile as it may seem. I know in the EU, people don't want chat control, yet no matter what, ladies and gentlemen, no matter how you slice it, they will still try to push that dog shit through. But still, keep the fight going. When it comes to a government, when it comes to how much they really care, remember, this is the same government that has been alleged in cases, right, of colluding with the Sinaloa drug cartel. Yeah, imagine the DEA colluding with the Sinaloa cartel, one of the largest drug trafficking organizations in the world. Now, again, you don't have to be somebody that is so fucking naive or so red-pilled to know that if you have a country with the strongest intelligence apparatus around you, it should make no sense that just south of the border, a few hours drive from, actually not even a few hour drives from some cities in Southern California, you can go across the border and see where the real Mexican cowboys reign supreme. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where, if you look into it, there have been whistleblowers allegedly in the DEA claiming that certain officials, motivated by financial gain or misguided notions of intelligence gathering, turns a blind eye to the Guzman brothers' activities. These alleged collusions allowed the Sinaloa cartel to operate with relative impunity, perpetuating the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Now, if these allegations hold true, it represents a staggering betrayal of the Americans' public trust. But ultimately, do they even give a shit? Will people actually rise up and fucking challenge the DEA to be dismantled if it turns out this is true? Which, honestly, you don't have to be an idiot to not somewhat believe. There's a lot of unbelievable conspiracy theories. But to tell me that the largest drug trafficking organization doesn't perpetuate its operations just south of the border because it ultimately has the approval from some elements of the United States to operate in the area. How the fuck do you think they get access to the craziest guns in the world? How the fuck do you think they're able to smuggle in that much dope across the border? If they were really the threat that they were, if they were really bad, their balls would be snipped, which they have had a long time ago. Now, I'm not bringing this up for no real reason. Obviously, when I think about illegality, which does happen a lot on adult websites,
Yeah, obviously the government can go after some of these websites, and they do. For instance, when it comes to girls do pornography, Michael Pratt ended up getting like sentenced to 27 years for sex trafficking hundreds of women in this situation. So if the government wants to go after drug traffickers, human traffickers, they absolutely can. When it comes to the internet and many of these websites existing, there is a case that yes, some people can access illegal material, but when does it stop, right? Obviously, we can keep going down the privacy train until every single aspect is unfortunately taken away from us. But even that is impossible because for every VPN they infiltrate, another one will sprout up. But it's a matter of identifying which VPN that you're going to be going to that is safe for the general person, which will become harder and harder as this fight goes on. And when it comes to things like the dark web, for instance, that's the ultimate last final boss. When does it happen? When like some of these legislators make it so that downloading the Tor browser or having it on your system would one day be considered illegal, right? Again, when you look at the internet, when you look at the freedom that we have, you can't really look away from the fact that all of this just comes down to monitoring what you're doing. Again, the government decides what is vague and harmful for children, and it could literally be anything according to how these laws are written. In reality, it's the government around the world, every single organization trying to make it so that you give up your identification to access the internet. And the people that are exempt from this are the people that are legislating it on you, and it's the people that are up at the top echelon of society that are not subject to the same rules you and I are. And you could say, no matter what, listen, they're gonna know what I'm doing. That is true. You can obviously give up and be defeatist about it. But obviously, when you look at how much of your information is floating around out there, you can take reasonable steps to limit it as much as you can. I don't think anybody really envisioned that your information should be floating through servers that don't take care of your security whatsoever. And even if there is a big data leak that happens because of it, unfortunately, there's not really much other than a vague slap on the wrist for a lot of these organizations. So if you know the punishment for the people that are supposed to be overseeing your privacy isn't that high, should you really trust them into having your information that could actually be used against you down the road, right? If things do get leaked. Remember that going forward. And what's to say when a government decides what is and isn't illegal to see? What happens when a website is tripped by the big government and the big like organizations into being dangerous or harmful and puts you on like the craziest watch lists? How scary is it when you have your government mandated ID tagged with every single website that I guess you're not supposed to go to? At what point is this not some vague form of censorship where in order to access information that is too risque, you have to start giving up your personal identification to access things? What they're doing is adding a barrier of annoyance, but they're also adding a barrier where they can catalog where and when you go to. There is going to be no option to browse the internet at your own leisure, at your own privacy, as opposed to being somebody that is always watched, always monitored, always tracked in every single way. This makes it so that if you're a journalist, this makes it so that if you have an actual reason for privacy, it becomes almost near impossible for you to do, which is ultimately a net negative in society.
Decades ago, we created the internet at this point, right? A technology that allowed people to talk to each other. We opened up Pandora's box. And somehow the oldest politicians in the world, motherfuckers that have been alive since the end of World War II, now suddenly want to decide how to control this technology that they don't even completely understand. So what they're going to do is they're going to destroy the ever-loving shit out of it. And look, at the end of the day, one of the wildest things about this too is that it doesn't just stop here. I'm pretty sure they're going to end up going at places like the dark web down the road. The dark web, which was a technology made or initially conceived by the US Navy when it came to things like onion routing, eventually blew it to its own project where actually a percentage of the funds for this kind of stuff does come from the US government. And the thing about anonymity and free speech and censorship is that ultimately you have to understand that for these technologies to exist, for your safety to be protected, you unfortunately have to live in a world where people can use these same technologies for bad reasons. Now, I don't want to sit here and promote things like drug use, but this is actually a prime example of something that I've spotted on the deep web that would probably be banned or require you to use an ID that I think is helpful for people that are going through drug issues. Drugs are not something that you can get rid of. I heard somewhere that once we discovered the value of cocaine, we lost the war on drugs.
But using things like r/harm reduction, which is a dreaded subreddit, yes, it's a Reddit on the dark web that people can use in order to learn how to make sure that what they have bought is safe, is something that is inadvertently saved lives. Now, again, I'm not saying that you should be taking drugs whatsoever. I do not promote that. Do not do any form of illegal drugs. Hell, keep away from the legal drugs as much as you can. But generally, places like this exist that would be locked behind an ID that ultimately do provide resources that probably save more lives than the government wants to give them credit for.
The internet, they're going after the VPNs next, and I'm pretty sure they're going to go after things like the dark web next. It doesn't stop until every bit of your privacy is taken away. But at least in the beginning of this video, I hope you learned that there are still ways in the internet connected age that we have that you can retain your privacy. And there are ways that you can fight back. If these organizations start going after Bitcoin ATMs, places where you can only transact and do so much business, such a small amount at a time that it really isn't even all that big of a deal. I hope that'll answer your question what the ultimate goal of this is. And it's not to protect the kids. It's to take away the only bit of privacy that you have left. 300 years ago, when America was a nation that formed, right? It was formed to fight off against a mass wave of tyranny. Unfortunately, if the founding fathers were alive today, I think they would probably be fucking ashamed at seeing that tyranny come back into the country that they came to, that they loved, that they built with their own two hands. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.